Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alex Richards, and I'm the principal at Fancy Farm Elementary School. I'm going to be talking to you guys today about TFI 1.6, defining inappropriate behavior to support teacher clarity and consistency. So, just a little bit about our school. We're from Fancy Farm, Kentucky. We're a rural P through 5 elementary school serving about 300 students in far western Kentucky in Graves County. About 60 to 65% of our students are economically disadvantaged, and then we also have a wide range of needs that we support through special education, 504, family resource services as well. So our systems are PBIS rolled out in Tier 1 in 23-24. I started in this position in 24-25, so I came in on year 2 in Tier 2. But we really began to look at our systems and things that we've had in place to define different behavior levels and just have that clarity among our staff about what was a teacher managed behavior versus an office managed behavior so that we could then apply interventions and logical consequences to support and hopefully change that behavior. The overarching goal with this has been so that we can provide predictable, consistent, and an instructional approach to behavior, much like you do with RTI and tiered instruction with academics applying that same to behavior. So everything that we've worked with ties into our SOAR expectations, our PBIS expectations with SOAR safety, ownership, achievement, and respect. You'll see that kind of throughout this presentation. So based on the criteria here, we rated ourselves at a level 4 as our definitions are clearly documented, trained, and consistently applied across staff. And that's kind of what I'll walk you through in this slide and then other pieces of this presentation. But we really wanted to focus on defining the inappropriate behavior and then support of teacher clarity and consistency because making sure that everybody is on the same page with that. Make sure that everyone has a clear and consistent understanding of what is a teacher managed behavior versus an office managed behavior. So when I started in 2024, we went from August to about November, and we'll see on our data here in just a couple of slides is that it looks like we had no behavior going on. And I guarantee you guys, we're not that school with no behaviors going on. But what we lacked was that consistent tracking piece so that we could have that data to then analyze with our admin team and with our PBIS team to determine next steps of what we would need to do. So in November of 2024, my school counselor, my PBIS team, we all kind of got together and looked at how can we make sure what is a system that we can put in place so that everyone is on the same page about what behavior is managed in the classroom versus what is sent to the office. So we tried to provide clear definitions, examples, non-examples, and how that aligned to our SOAR expectations. So we rolled this out through staff training. We revisited it consistently throughout the year during PLCs just to answer clarifying questions, address concerns that might come up along the way. But since we've implemented the behavior levels chart that we'll look at here in just a second, we've seen that staff are consistently applying those definitions, and over 80% of our behaviors are being managed in the classroom, with the still opportunity for office and administrative support for those higher needs, for those safety concerns that may come up. So once we had those clear definitions in place, we were able to see the impact on our data, which is what we'll look at next. So the value of this work, it really wasn't about student behavior. It's about clarity for the adults. Before this work, 2 teachers, we have a 5th and 6th grade rotation. So if I'm in math class and I don't have a charger for my Chromebook, that could be viewed one way by one teacher. I could quote unquote get in trouble for that in one room, but not the other. So what we wanted to do is make sure that inconsistency wasn't creating confusion for students, that it was the same experience that they were getting in one room as they were getting in others, and that staff weren't frustrated about one thing in one room and not the other. So it kind of worked 2 ways. once we clearly defined what is teacher managed versus office managed behavior, it gave our teachers the confidence to handle those behaviors in the classroom. Like it was about empowering our teachers. I had a teacher come to me and say, "You gave us our power back to be able to handle those things in the classroom." Another piece, like as an instructional leader, having those teacher managed behaviors in the classroom helped to protect our instructional time so students weren't out of class, and they could continue to have access to instruction and learning. Another big shift for us was equity. Students are now getting more consistent responses, no matter where they are, whether it's specials, whether it's math, whether it's in the cafeteria, whatever that might look like, that it's consistent. And again, that's the biggest shift in kind of growth for me as a learner, and that I see through a learner and a leader through this is your systems to make sure that you can ensure that equity across all settings. So our data, we had 80% of our behaviors are now handled in the tier 1 level in the classroom, and then office referrals have been, again, reserved for true safety concerns. So the biggest takeaway, the value is when the adults are consistent, students know what to expect, and that's where the real change and where the real quote unquote meat of this work has really taken place for us at Fancy Farm. So when we look at behavior levels 1 through 3, this is a screenshot of our document. We actually printed it on green paper so that teachers would have this. You know, you hand out a lot of paper at any point, and they're like, "Hey, what was that?" We have this linked on our index, and it's just a visual. We printed it so they would have access to it, but again, have access online as well. But teacher managed behaviors at the high school level I taught at, we would call these minors, but we Fancy Farm call them teacher managed behaviors. These are behaviors that can and should be handled in the classroom. So like that's part of my expectation with this is that, hey, we've got somebody that's sleeping in class, then they probably don't need to come down to, if they're trying to avoid being in class by sleeping, and then you send them out of class, are you not reinforcing that type of behavior? So a key part of our work was clearly defining what falls into these levels. So you'll see that in the far left column, and then pairing them with instructional responses that teachers could do, some interventions or supports we could put in proactively to provide the student with opportunities to correct that behavior. But then also when you get to the consequence piece of it, making sure that there are logical consequences. What we saw some of was a double punishment. Hey, you have to have isolated seating, plus you miss your recess, but you're doing two things for one misbehavior. But then also making sure that those consequences are appropriate and immediate. So, like, for example, if I'm in my 2 p.m. class and I'm talking out, calling out, and hey, you're taking my recess, but my recess isn't until 11:15 the next day, there's not really that connection from the student to them want to change that behavior is kind of what we saw on that. This system allowed us to track these. We track it through Looker Studio. Teachers, they'll go through, they'll choose student names, the behaviors, and then they'll plug in all the different interventions, consequences, and things like that. What I like on this piece is the parent contact piece, so that all of our stakeholders are on the same page and aware about what we're seeing in the classroom, in specials, and gym at recess, and things like that. This level of documentation is what we were missing at. I know talked at the beginning about like August to November, we missed this a little bit. So we really couldn't then take the next steps to analyze the data and then to make tweaks and things that we needed to do. Together, these levels create a complete system, and then we look at levels 4 through 6. Let me speed up. Oh my goodness, guys, we're already 9 minutes in. So I'm going to try to speed up. I'll talk fast if you guys can listen fast, okay? Levels 4 through 6 are more severe. These would be like majors, is what we call them at the high school levels. There's safety concerns or significant concerns or disruptions to learning. These are intentionally separated from levels 1 through 3 to ensure that only the high level concerns get to the office managed behavior. Because again, at the end of the day, admin, you've got different roles and responsibility, but this still prioritizes safety so that if you have any of those major concerns, that those can be addressed immediately. and proportionately. We do track this through our office managed behaviors in Google Forms. So that kind of helps me to keep everything separated so that data doesn't get overlapped or anything like that. The system did not eliminate office managed behaviors. Those things still happen at our school, but it helped. What it did, the important work that it did, was it helped us to track and manage these more effectively. So looking at strengthening clarity and consistency in behavior definitions. So on the left, what you'll see is when I started, we didn't have any quote unquote behaviors here. That's not true. That's not what's happening. What we lacked was the system through which teachers could input this, and then again we take and analyze that data. So the year before I was here, the previous administration used teacher managed behavior, what we use for teacher managed behavior, for their office managed behavior. And so the systems and kind of getting everybody on the same page was key at that point. So when we looked at August and November, which showed that we had a clarity problem among adults about how to use the system appropriately, you can see that there was very little teacher managed behavior being documented. Not that that wasn't happening, because our teachers are veterans. They're equipped and they know what to do to handle behaviors and manage their classrooms effectively. But after we implemented that in November, you see that we had over 500 teacher managed behaviors. And then again, some office managed over here as well. But the important piece on this is that consistency piece of, we've got the data now, but then the shift that we saw was the consistent intervention and then consequences that people were doing across our building. Because of that, we're keeping more students in the classroom and focused on learning. So I go ahead and head to the next one because I've got 3 minutes. From inconsistency to clarity. So some pieces that we saw before in August to November. Some behaviors were escalated to the office with teacher managed categories. The descriptions show a variation in the way that staff would interpret the severity of different things. Classroom disruptions and noncompliance appearing in office managed referral. And then it indicated that we had a lack shared understanding and a reliance on your individual preferences or judgment rather than systems definitions from teacher to teacher. So staff were responding to behavior, but it just wasn't consistent. So after we made the behavior levels document and system, teacher managed behaviors reflected reteaching expectations, logical consequence and alignment to our SOAR expectations. And then our office managed behaviors still were predominantly those level 4 through 6 behaviors. We saw the system and the way we wanted it to work. The minor behaviors were handled in the classroom. The majors were handled to the office. The consistency in language and consequences across the building were consistent as well. And overall, our staff now are defining behavior consistently, applying the same decision process and rules, and using the behavior levels framework with fidelity. So the impact that you see here, like if I'm looking at this and I'm a new leader and I still am a new leader, man, Alex, it looks like you had nothing and then it goes up to like 500. But the big picture, the consistency is key. Like the dot on the left side right here, that's 24, 25 when we started implementing the behavior levels, but we stuck with it and people have gotten more familiar with it. So the trend line is our data in terms of our entries of behaviors is decreasing. So is this going to be worth my time? Is this going to be something that I should invest and share with my staff? I would say from our experience that it has been something that we've found success with. And I think that with fidelity and that consistent approach on it, any school could find that same approach and success as well. So our TFI assessment just looks at how we went through and scored ourselves at a level 4. We used our behavior data, our teacher managed and office managed behavior. We used our PBIS walkthrough tool, which was our staff input and staff opportunity where the co-op would come in. We had 80% of our staff who were able to accurately define behaviors and explain how they respond to each with our behavior levels chart. They also had a self-assessment survey where 85 to 90% of our staff reported confidence in applying behavior definitions consistently. And again, we're a smaller school, but again, that piece of veteran versus new teachers, I think that's a big piece to have 85 to 90% that system in place to make sure that they have the tools in their toolbox to handle their behaviors in their classroom. It's 2 o'clock, and I've got like 2 more slides. I'm going to try to speak even faster. We've also had parent input on this through our family resource needs assessment. We did this at our parent teacher conferences as they were waiting. They would fill that out. They express 85% of our families agree that expectations and behavior responses are clear and consistent. And then we looked at all this and compared it to the rubric, which required clear documented definitions, staff training, and shared understanding, and the consistent application. And that's how we arrived at the level of 4 on that. So our future action steps on this is ongoing staff collaboration. Next year, we're going to have 10 out of the 19 certified staff that I'm going to have in the building are going to be new. So that's going to be super important that the way we roll this out with new staff, the system to make sure that it's strong will be key, and the way that we manage and handle behaviors in our school across from primary to specials and then to our intermediate end. Our next steps focus on sustaining consistency through staff collaboration, training, family alignment, and ongoing data monitoring while we continue to strengthen how we respond to our behavior and trying to continue to get better at that piece. As we look at data, is the system still working despite those staff changes? So looking at those pieces of monitoring our data with fidelity and tracking that and seeing is it new staff, is it veteran staff, and how do we need to adjust and go in and refine in PLCs or through coaching conversations of how to use that system most effectively. And then down at the bottom, will connect us to TFI 1.7, which is going to lead into some PD and work that we're going to be doing this summer of how we respond to behavior. Just continue to look at those instructional responses in terms of interventions and things that we can provide in to be proactive and preventative. Then also restorative practices, implementing restorative chats and other things like circles as we go in and continue to equip and to grow our staff's capacity with this. So we've built clarity. Now our focus is on maintaining it, strengthening our system to continue and sustain that change as we have staff change and we have student change. So that was super quick, but hopefully that kind of gives you a rundown of kind of where our journey has been at Fancy Farm. And so I think at this point, I'd be happy to take questions that you guys might have in your journey.